I think we're probably ready to take some questions from the audience.
Where are people meant to? I know there's a microphone
running around.
Are people meant to come to you? Okay, so people, if anybody wants to ask a question, get there. Ah! God, there's thousands of you. It felt so much safer when it was dark.
First question.
Okay, now before we start in on questions, just want to say something. A question is a relatively short, interrogative statement ending in a question mark, capable of being answered from the stage. If you want to tell us what you think, that's not a question. Save it for later. Also, you may find yourself murdered by the audience. So, question, short, ends in question mark, capable of being answered.
Hi. You've done every sort of storytelling there is, like from movies, comic books, the likes. Have you ever considered writing a story for a video game?
Yes, I have. Back in the 1990s, I was actually approached by a number of video game companies and started working on several of them. And one by one, every time, what would actually happen is I'd do a bunch of work and then the company would go bankrupt. I got nothing out of it except one day I got a phone call saying, they're coming in at 3 o'clock to lock the doors. The computer we were going to send you, the notebook computer, has just arrived. I'm sending it out FedEx to you, then I'm tearing up the label and denying that I know anything about it. Oh, okay. So I did actually get a computer out of it. But during the 90s, I just sent computer game companies into bankruptcy and felt incredibly guilty. Very recently, I started work with some nice people on a very small sort of game, and we're playing with some stuff. So we'll see, and if I like that from having dipped my toe in the water, I may go back and do some more. So I'm no longer saying, I will not do it again, I cannot be, and we're playing with some stuff. So we'll see, and if I like that from having dipped my toe in the water, I may go back and do some more. So I'm no longer saying, I will not do it again, I cannot be responsible for driving Electronic Arts out of business. I know it will happen the moment that I start.
Hi. Hopefully this isn't too niche, but it refers to Miracle Man and something that you started about 20 years ago, or nearly finished 20 years ago and didn't quite get a chance to. Will you ever get a chance to finish Miracle Man? And would you be able to tell the same story that you were writing then, now?
So the question is Miracle Man. Miracle Man was something that I was writing until 1993, when Eclipse Comics went out of business. And then it disappeared down a strange and very wormy hole. My understanding right now is that the rights to Marvel Man / Miracle Man were bought by Marvel Comics from Nick Anglo, the creator, before his death a few years ago. And should Marvel actually be in a position to start going forward, reprinting the stuff that already exists and go forward with it, I would love to finish the story that I began then. One full issue exists that nobody's ever seen, all letters and everything, and it's going to be very, very odd going back and trying to finish it. I don't know. I would absolutely try. I don't know if I'd be any good. I might turn around and just go, I am not the person who wrote this all that time ago. But
you did say once you don't like sequels, you don't like going...
Well, this isn't a sequel, this is finishing a story.
You don't like going back.
Yeah, but I do things like start stories. You know, Coraline, I started, wrote the first third of, and then 8 years later went and finished. You know, I definitely, and you cannot tell stylistically, it's the same thing all the way through. So these things happen. I could definitely see myself finishing it. I hope I can.
Hi. There's a scene in the film Let the Right One In where the boy asks the vampire girl how old she is, and she says, "I'm 8. I've been 8 for a very long time." I was wondering if that was an influence on this book, and if not, were there any other books which influenced you in terms of the relationships between children?
I loved the original version of Let the Right One In. I don't think it is. The relationship between the kids in there, and you'll see the relationship between Letty and our hero are very different. And it's actually not, it's one of my very few books where it would be very hard for me to say, well, it came from this book. You know, there's not really an author that I'm doing, or a voice that I'm doing. It's very, you'll see, it's very sort of me all the way through, like a stick of rock. Me.
Having written a bit of everything pretty much, is there any format that you prefer writing in, or any format that you really don't like writing in?
I would love to do, there's a lot of things, there's still things I haven't done. I want to write a musical. Love to do an original stage play, and after that I start sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel for things I haven't done yet. I you know, years ago said that I don't actually have a career structure. I just sort of had a list that I put together when I was about 15, and everything I wanted to do. And I remember showing it to my mum, and she said, "It's very nice to you." And that was my list, you know, that was my everything I wanted to do in my life, and I have actually sort of almost finished it.
Do you have any subject in mind for the musical?
I've been talking with Stephen Merritt of the Magnetic Fields, and he and I have a plan to do something around the Grand Guignol, the theatre of the scary and horrible, from France. So we may do something pretty scary and horrible. Or not. You never know.
Hi. American Gods and your work in general has changed my literary landscape in a huge way. I just wanted to know if there's something that an author you've read or a book specific that you've read that's changed the way that you look at sort of writing and everything in general.
I think discovering Alan Moore's work in when I was about 22 was a huge eye-opener for me. And it was an eye-opener mostly because it confirmed all these things that I suspected that I thought were wrong. Or suspected, but I'd been told were wrong. Like, I thought that you could probably write comics that were as good as anything else out there, as powerful as any other medium, except that everybody else seemed to think that was mad. And then I read what Alan was doing, and I went, you can. And then I sort of looked at more of what he was doing, and I thought, this is really interesting. He's writing comedy that's funny, scary stuff that's actually scary and has ideas in it, exciting stuff that's exciting, literary stuff that seems perfectly, you're allowed to do this. You really are. I always thought you were. Except that everybody said, no, you have to find the one thing that you do, and you have to do that. And I knew I'd never be any good at finding the one thing I wanted to do and doing that, because I wanted to do all sorts of things. So I think Alan definitely sort of gave me an amazing amount of permission, without even knowing it at the time, before we were friends, to do stuff. I think there's a few other authors who definitely changed the way I thought about things. Jonathan Carroll is one. There's an American author called Gene Wolfe, who is so very, very tricky, and really got me understanding the concept of unreliable narrators, and got me understanding that you could do very, very smart things while still telling a story. And also, probably the most influential writer and friend, who I still miss enormously, was Diana Wynne-Jones. And, you know, Diana, reading what she did, again, her attitude that no, you know, there is no particular line between science fiction and fantasy except the one that you make. There's no line, there's nothing you can't do. And the joy and the gusto with which she did it, and never told the same story twice. So definitely Diana, and I still miss her.
Hello, sir. I hope you're well. I've always been amazed by how well you write your, specifically the female characters in your novels, like everything from Sandman through to American Gods. And I was just really wondering if there was any major female influence on you that inspired any of those characters, all told.
Nobody particular that I can think of. What always used to astonish me was sort of more the reverse, because I would read comics and sometimes novels written by men, and I'd go, this is really weird. There are no women in here. Sometimes there are what appear to be men with funny things strapped to their chests. And I would start puzzling about this. I would go, this is really weird. Is it possible? I know there is a peninsula in Greece that women are forbidden to tread on, and that only men are allowed on this peninsula in Greece, mostly in monasteries. Is it possible that, you know, all of these comics writers were born and raised on that peninsula, abandoned as small boys? You know, it was this sort of thing. They must have met women. Don't they have mothers or sisters or lunch ladies? I mean, you can't go through life without encountering women. And look, they're just women. And so I started trying very consciously to put women into my stories, not as decorations, but just as people. I had this mad idea that I could write convincing women if I just wrote people. And it seems to have paid off.
First of all, thanks all. That's a good episode, brilliant. I just wanted to ask you about the myths and legends you talk a lot about in your books. Have you ever got a favourite one at all?
Okay, favorite myths and legends. Right now, I have a tendency to return time and again to the Norse. I really love the Norse myths. I think because they're doomed. And it adds a sort of a layer to most myths don't have proper endings. And if they do have endings, all of the good guys survive. And, you know, you run into the book of Revelations, and yes, there's going to be a giant apocalyptic thingy, but all the good guys just hang out at the end. It's easy. And what I love about the Norse is they're doomed, and they're really grumpy. And the only one of them I really like is Loki, and then he becomes more and more of a bastard as the thing goes on, and he turns up in part of the one of the Eddas in a thing called Loki's Flighting, where he gets drunk and comes in at dinner, and he's just like, well, you'll shag anything, and you're stupid, and just insulting them all relatively accurately, and after that his doom is sealed. So, probably the Norse. And then I'll fall in love with other myths, but I always come back to the Norse, because they're bastards.